There are moments when the life you have been holding together no longer holds, not suddenly or dramatically, but slowly, as if something beneath the surface has been weakening for months, and only now, in the stillness, do you feel the ground begin to give way beneath your feet. You have been carrying something, and you know what it is, even though you have only named it quietly to yourself in the hours when no one else is awake, telling yourself it was manageable, that it was not as bad as it could have been, that time perhaps would soften it and distance would make it smaller. But it has not become smaller, it has only become more familiar, and now in the middle of an ordinary day you realize you are not just living with what you did, but living as someone who did it. The action no longer something separate from you, but woven into the way you speak, the way you move through rooms, the way you avoid certain conversations and certain people, shaping your life around it without meaning to, until the shape of that life is no longer one you recognize. This is not guilt in the way people describe guilt, not a voice accusing you, but something quieter than that, the feeling that you have become someone you did not plan to become and you cannot remember the exact moment it happened. You try to explain it to yourself, reconstructing the sequence of events to find the point where things could have gone differently, but the explanations feel thin because they worked once when the distance was still new, yet now when you repeat them they sound like someone else's voice, someone who still believed their own story, and you are not that person anymore. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes with pretending, not the exhaustion of effort, but the exhaustion of vigilance, of monitoring every word and every expression and every interaction to make sure nothing slips, of constructing a version of yourself that can be seen by others without collapsing, of maintaining the image even when you are alone, because if you stop even for a moment you might have to look at what is underneath. And you've looked, not intentionally, or all at once, but in glimpses, in the seconds before sleep, in the mirror when you were not prepared, in the silence after someone asked if you were okay, and you said yes, and you saw something you did not want to see, not a monster, or something unrecognizable, but something smaller, something fragile, something that has been pretending to be whole. You have spent so much energy trying to be someone worth defending, someone whose actions make sense, someone who had reasons and was pushed and was justified, and for a time that story held because you could tell it to yourself and believe it, framing the past in a way that made you the person you needed to be. But the story is failing now, not because someone else challenged it, but because you can no longer hear it without feeling the distance between the words and the weight in your chest, tired of managing the narrative and translating your own life into something more acceptable, exhausted by the constant adjustment between what happened and what you allow yourself to remember. And beneath the exhaustion is something worse, a fear not of being caught or of consequences, but of what remains if you stop defending yourself, the terror that if you let go of the story there will be nothing left, that you are nothing more than what you did, that the worst thing about you is the only true thing. You have heard people speak of grace and forgiveness and new beginnings, and the words sound kind, they sound like relief, but they require something you are not sure you can give, because they require you to stop hiding not from others but from yourself, and you have been hiding for so long that you are not sure who you would be without it. There is a psalm that begins in this place not with hope or certainty, but with a man who can no longer sustain the image of innocence, who has run out of explanations and come to the end of what he can manage on his own. It is not a prayer of someone asking politely for help, but the language of someone whose internal life has been exposed and who has nothing left to offer but the truth, beginning with a single word that is not justice or fairness or what is deserved but mercy, because the man speaking knows that what he deserves will not save him. He does not argue his case or explain the circumstances or list the reasons why it was not entirely his fault, but simply names what he has done and asks for something he cannot earn. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. This is not the language of someone who feels misunderstood, but the language of someone who has been seen clearly and who knows it, and you recognize this moment not because you have prayed these words, but because you have felt what precedes them, the collapse of self-justification, the failure of distraction, the unbearable clarity that comes when you can no longer pretend you are someone else. For a long time you believed that if you could just hold yourself together, if you could just keep moving forward, the past would eventually lose its power. That time would create enough distance and new achievements and new relationships and new versions of yourself would eventually outweigh what came before. But it has not worked that way because the past is not something behind you but something inside you, and no amount of forward motion has changed that truth, and you have tried to outrun it by burying it beneath productivity and busyness and the construction of a life that looks whole from the outside, yet the weight has remained, quiet and persistent and undeniable, and now when you are still you feel it not as accusation but as presence, a kind of knowledge that cannot be unlearned. The man who wrote Psalm 51 knew this weight because he had tried to live with it, continuing in his role and his responsibilities and the appearance of normalcy, while something inside him fractured, the fracture widening until he could no longer move without feeling it. The psalm does not tell us how long he waited, how many months or years he spent trying to manage the dissonance between who he was and what he had done, but we know he reached a point where management was no longer possible, and the only option left was to stop pretending. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. This is not a metaphor, but the language of someone who feels contaminated, who feels that what they did has entered them in a way that cannot be undone by explanation or justification, who wants more than anything to be clean again, but who does not know if that is still possible. You understand this uncertainty because you have felt the longing for restoration without the confidence that it can happen, wanting to be free of what you carry but not knowing how, and the not knowing has kept you in a kind of limbo where you are not fully hiding but not fully exposed, not entirely lost but not entirely found. There is a particular kind of loneliness in this place because you cannot speak of it, not fully or honestly, while the people around you know the version of you that still makes sense, the version that fits into conversations and relationships in daily life, but they do not know the version that wakes at 3 a.m. and stares at the ceiling trying to reconcile who you have been with who you are now. You've considered telling someone, imagining the conversation with its careful choice of words and measured tone, hoping they will understand without you having to say too much, but you have not done it because you are afraid that if you speak it aloud it will become more real, that the image others have of you will shatter, that you will lose the only version of yourself that still feels stable. And so you remain silent, not because you want to, but because the cost of honesty feels too high, while the man in the psalm did not have that option because his actions had already been exposed, and the life he had constructed had already collapsed, leaving no image left to protect, and no version of himself that could be salvaged through careful management. He had been seen fully and completely by God and by others and by himself, and in that exposure something unexpected happened because he stopped defending. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. This is not confession as performance or as strategy, but confession as recognition, as the simple exhausting acknowledgement that what he did is part of who he is, that he cannot separate himself from it, that it is always there, present and unavoidable. You know this feeling, the inability to forget, the constant awareness even in moments of distraction that something is wrong, that you are carrying something you cannot set down, while people speak of moving on and letting go and releasing the past, and you have tried to focus on the present and build something new and shift your attention elsewhere. But the past does not release its grip, simply because you wish it to. It remains persistent and undeniable, a weight you cannot name to others but cannot ignore in yourself, and beneath the weight is a question you have not wanted to ask. What if this is who I am now, not who I was or who I will be, but who I am? What if the worst thing I have done is not an anomaly but a revelation, exposing something that was always there, something you had managed to keep hidden even from yourself, and this is the fear that lives beneath the guilt, the fear that you are not fundamentally good with occasional failures, but fundamentally broken with occasional successes, that the darkness you glimpsed in yourself is not a passing shadow but the truest thing about you. The psalmist does not shy away from this fear or soften it with optimism or deflect it with excuses, but speaks it plainly. Against you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. This is not a legal statement about consequences or punishment, but about the fracture in the relationship that matters most, the awareness that what he did was not just a violation of rules, but a betrayal of love and of trust, and of the only source of life that could sustain him, and in naming it, he does something unexpected because he accepts the verdict. So that you are right in your verdict and justified when you judge. He does not ask God to reconsider or argue for leniency based on extenuating circumstances, but agrees with the judgment, acknowledging that if he is measured by what he has done, he will be found wanting, and yet he does not stop speaking. This is the paradox at the center of the psalm, the recognition that he deserves judgment combined with the refusal to accept that judgment as the final word, the acknowledgement of guilt alongside the insistence that guilt is not the whole story, because he is guilty and he is asking for mercy, and both are true, and he does not try to resolve the tension. You live in this tension because you know you are responsible for what you did, and you know you cannot undo it, and you know that if your life were evaluated solely on the basis of your actions, the evaluation would not be kind, and yet you do not want your actions to be the whole story, wanting there to be something more, something deeper, something that remains even after the worst of you has been exposed, but you do not know what that something is, and you are afraid to hope for it because hope feels like self-deception, like another way of avoiding the truth. So you remain suspended between guilt and grace, between self-condemnation and the faint, fragile possibility that condemnation is not the end, while the psalm moves deeper still. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. This is not a statement of despair, but a statement of honesty, an acknowledgement that the problem is not just what he did, but what he is, that the fracture runs all the way down, and there is no clean version of himself to return to, because the brokenness is woven into his very being. You have felt this realization that the problem is not just your actions, but the person capable of those actions, that fixing your behavior will not fix what is underneath, that you are not a good person who made a mistake, but a flawed person who revealed their flaw. And this realization brings a kind of hopelessness, because if the problem is who you are, and not just what you did, then what hope is there? How do you change the foundation of yourself? The psalmist does not answer this question or offer a technique or a strategy or a plan for self-improvement, but simply turns to the only one who can do what he cannot. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. This is the language of desperation, of someone who has tried everything within his own power, and has found it insufficient, who knows that the cleansing he needs cannot come from himself. Hyssop, a small ordinary plant used in ancient rituals of purification, not because it had magic properties, but because it was a sign, a symbol of something beyond the physical, of the possibility that what is contaminated can be made clean, and what is broken can be restored. Though you do not know if you believe this, or if restoration is possible, or if you are simply clinging to a comforting story because the alternative is unbearable, but you do know that you cannot cleanse yourself because you have tried discipline and distraction and self-punishment and self-forgiveness, and none of it has reached the place where the contamination lives because the stain is too deep. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. These words do not come from someone who feels joyful, but from someone who remembers what joy felt like and who longs for it with a desperation that borders on grief. You remember a time before the weight, before the constant vigilance, before the division between the person you show and the person you hide, remembering what it felt like to move through the world without carrying this heaviness. And you want it back, but you do not know how to get there from here, or if the path even exists, or if it is possible to return to a state of lightness after everything that has accumulated. The bones you have crushed. This is not poetic exaggeration, but the physical reality of carrying moral weight. The way it settles into your body and makes you tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. The way it bends you slowly until you are not sure you remember what it felt like to stand upright. You have felt this weariness, this bone-deep exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you have slept or how hard you have worked, but is the tiredness of holding yourself together and maintaining the facade and living in the gap between who you are and who you need to appear to be, and you are tired of being tired. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquity. This is a strange request because he has just asked to be seen clearly, to have his sin acknowledged and named, and now he is asking for it to be hidden and erased and removed from sight. It is not a contradiction, but the movement from exposure to mercy, from the brutal honesty of seeing himself as he is to the fragile hope that he does not have to remain this way forever. And you understand this movement because you have wanted both. You have wanted to be seen and to have someone witness the fullness of who you are, including the parts you have hidden, and you have wanted to be released from that seeing, to have the record wiped clean, to exist without the constant weight of your own history. But you do not know if both are possible, if you can be fully known and fully forgiven, if exposure and mercy can coexist, though the psalm insists they can. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. This is the turning point, the shift from confession to request, from naming what is broken to asking for what only God can do. Create, not repair or improve or adjust, but create, as if what is needed is not a better version of the old heart, but an entirely new one. And this is both terrifying and hopeful because it means the old heart cannot be salvaged, that no amount of effort or discipline or good intention can fix what is fundamentally flawed. But it is also hopeful because it means the solution is not dependent on you, that the work of transformation is something you receive rather than something you produce. You do not know if you believe in this kind of transformation because you have heard stories of people who claim to have been changed and to have become new and to have been freed from what they carried, but you have also seen people who claim change and remain the same, who spoke the right words but live the same life, and you do not want to be that person who performs transformation without experiencing it, who speaks of grace without feeling its weight. So you remain cautious and skeptical, waiting to see if change is real, or if it is just another story you tell yourself to avoid the truth. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. This is the deepest fear, not punishment or suffering, but abandonment. The possibility that God, having seen him fully, will turn away and leave him alone with what he has done. You know this fear, the fear that if you are truly seen, you will be truly rejected, that the love and acceptance you have received is conditional on the image you project, and if that image falls, the love will fall with it, and you have lived with this fear so long that it has shaped the way you relate to everyone, because you offer only the parts of yourself that are acceptable, while you hide the rest, performing the role of the person who deserves to be loved, because you do not believe the real you would be enough. And the exhaustion of that performance has become unbearable, though the alternative is also unbearable, because to risk being seen and being left, to offer the truth and have it rejected, to discover that your worst fear was correct, and that you are too much or too broken or too far gone to be loved feels impossible. The psalmist does not know how God will respond, and can only voice the longing and wait in the uncertainty. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. This is not a request for happiness, or a desire to feel better, but a longing for the fundamental experience of being saved, of being held, of knowing that you are not alone in the wreckage of your own life. And joy in this context is not an emotion but a state of being, a kind of deep foundational security that comes from knowing you are seen and loved, despite what you have done, that your identity is not defined by your worst moment, that you are more than the sum of your failures. You want this desperately. You want to know that the broken parts of you do not disqualify you from belonging, that there is a place for you even in your mess, that you do not have to be whole to be welcomed. But you do not know if it is true, and so you live in the waiting, in the space between the request and the response, between the longing and the fulfillment. It is a hard place to live, uncertain and uncomfortable, and without guarantees, but it is also honest, more honest than the pretending, more honest than the management of image, more honest than the construction of a self that can be defended, and in the honesty there is a kind of freedom that is small and fragile but real. Then I will teach transgressors your ways so that sinners will turn back to you. This is the movement beyond the self, the recognition that this experience of collapse and mercy is not just for him, but part of a larger story, that the path from brokenness to restoration is one that others will need to walk. You have thought about this, about whether your experience of failure could somehow serve others, whether the honesty you have struggled to find in yourself could create space for others to be honest, whether your story could be something other than a cautionary tale, but you are not ready for that yet because you are still in the middle of your own collapse, still learning what it means to stop hiding, still discovering whether mercy is real or just another hope that will disappoint. And that is okay, because the psalm does not rush the process or move from confession to ministry without lingering in the raw, uncomfortable middle, allowing the man to remain in his brokenness, to speak from it, to ask for help without pretending he has already received it. Deliver me from the guilt of bloodshed, O God, you who are God my Savior, and my tongue will sing of your righteousness. There is blood, and there is guilt, and there is the knowledge that what he did caused real harm to real people, that it was not just a private failure but a public wound, that the consequences extend beyond himself. You carry this knowledge too. You know that what you did not only affect you, but rippled out in ways you cannot fully measure, that people were hurt and trust was broken, and something was damaged that may never be fully repaired. And this is perhaps the hardest part, because you can ask for mercy for yourself and hope for your own restoration, but you cannot undo the harm you caused or take back what was done. The guilt remains, and the blood remains, and the knowledge that you are responsible for pain you cannot fix. And the psalmist does not minimize this or say the harm was not that bad, or that people will get over it, or that time will heal all wounds, but simply names it, acknowledges it, and asks to be delivered from the weight of it, not because he deserves deliverance, but because he cannot carry it any longer. Open my lips, Lord, and my mouth will declare your praise. This is strange, because after everything, after all the confession and all the guilt and all the awareness of how deeply he has failed, he speaks of praise, not because everything is resolved or because the pain is gone, but because praise is the only response that makes sense when you have been seen at your worst and not abandoned, when you have been exposed and not destroyed, when you have told the truth and still been held. You do not feel like praising, you do not feel grateful or joyful or relieved, but tired and heavy and uncertain. Yet perhaps praise is not about feeling, but about recognition, about acknowledging that you are still here, still breathing, still held by something larger than your own ability to hold yourself together. You do not have the strength for it now, but you file it away as a possibility, as something that might come later, when the weight has lifted enough that you can lift your head. You do not want burnt offerings. You do not delight in sacrifice. My sacrifice, O God, is a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart you, God, will not despise. This is the heart of it. The recognition that what God wants is not performance or religious ritual or the appearance of holiness. but the simple painful truth of a heart that knows it is broken. You have a broken heart, you did not want it, and you did not choose it, but it is what you have, and the psalm says that is enough, that brokenness itself is the offering, that you do not have to fix yourself before you can approach, that you can come as you are in the mess and in the failure and in the exhaustion, and it will not be rejected. This is hard to believe because everything in you has been trained to believe that you have to earn acceptance, and that you have to be worthy, and that you have to present the best version of yourself in order to be loved. But the psalm insists otherwise, insisting that the broken version is the acceptable version, that God does not despise the heart that comes empty-handed and honest. You do not know if this is true, but you are tired enough to hope it might be. May it please you to prosper Zion, to build up the walls of Jerusalem. The psalm ends not with the individual, but with the community, with the recognition that personal restoration is connected to communal restoration, that the healing of one is tied to the healing of all. You're part of a community, and even in your isolation, even in your hiddenness, you are connected to others who are carrying their own weight, who are managing their own fractures, who are pretending in their own ways, and perhaps your willingness to stop pretending could create space for them to stop as well. Perhaps your honesty could give permission for their honesty. Perhaps the collapse of your carefully managed image could be the beginning of something more real. But that is not your responsibility right now, because right now your only task is to remain present in your own brokenness, to resist the urge to flee or defend, or rebuild the image too quickly, to simply be here in the mess, and in the exposure, and in the uncertainty, and to see if mercy is real. You have been living in hiding for so long, constructing explanations and managing perceptions, and maintaining a version of yourself that could withstand scrutiny, and it has cost you more than you realized or wanted to admit, costing you connection because you could not risk being known, costing you rest because you could never stop monitoring yourself, costing you joy because every moment of lightness was shadowed by the awareness of what you were hiding. And now standing in the rubble of the image you worked so hard to maintain, you have a choice. You can begin rebuilding and start constructing a new version, a better version, one that accounts for the failure but does not fully expose it, one that salvages what can be salvaged and buries the rest, or you can stay here in the exposure and in the discomfort and in the terrifying freedom of being seen. The first option is familiar and safe and manageable, while the second option is unknown and risky and uncontrolled. But the first option will only lead you back to where you are now, to another collapse, another exposure, another moment, when the image fails, and you are left standing in the truth you have been avoiding, whereas the second option might lead somewhere new, or it might lead nowhere, and you do not know. But you are beginning to suspect that the risk of honesty is smaller than the cost of continued hiding, that the vulnerability of being seen is less painful than the loneliness of remaining unknown, that the fragility of living without defenses is more sustainable than the exhaustion of maintaining them. You do not make this choice all at once, but in small moments, in the decision to tell the truth when a lie would be easier, in the willingness to let someone see you struggling instead of pretending you are fine, in the refusal to construct an explanation that makes you look better than you feel. And these are small acts that are quiet and unremarkable, but they are acts of resistance against the tyranny of image, against the demand that you be more than you are, against the belief that you have to earn your place in the world by being someone worth defending. You do not know what will happen if you keep making these choices, or if people will stay, or if they will understand, or if they will offer the mercy you are beginning to hope for, but you know that you cannot go back to who you were because that person is gone, the image has collapsed, the story has failed, and what remains is simply you, broken and tired and uncertain but no longer hiding. This is not the end you imagined because it is not triumphant or clean, and it does not come with guarantees or assurances or clear paths forward, but it is honest, and honesty you are learning is its own kind of grace. You still carry the weight because the guilt has not disappeared, and the consequences have not been erased, and the harm you caused still exists in the world, and you cannot take it back. But you are no longer alone with it because you have spoken it, and you have allowed it to be seen, and in the speaking and in the seeing something has shifted, not resolution but presence, the awareness that you are held even in your brokenness, that you do not have to be whole to belong, that the truth of who you are, including the worst of who you are, is not the end of the story. You do not know what comes next or how restoration works, or if it is even possible. You do not know if you will ever feel clean again or whole or free from the weight you carry, but you know that you can no longer hide, that the hiding has ended, that the exposure, as terrifying as it was, did not destroy you, and in that knowledge is the smallest, most fragile seed of hope. Not hope that everything will be fine or that the past will be undone, but hope that you can live in the truth and still be loved, that you can be broken and still be held, that you can fail and still belong. This hope is not loud, and it does not announce itself, and it does not push away the guilt or the grief or the exhaustion, but it is there, quiet and persistent and unearned. and you let it remain without interrogating it or demanding that it prove itself, simply noticing it and acknowledging it, and allowing it to exist alongside everything else you are carrying. Because you are learning that transformation does not mean the elimination of pain, but means the presence of something else within the pain, something that makes the pain bearable, something that allows you to remain present instead of fleeing. You are still here in the mess and in the brokenness and in the uncertainty, but you are here, and that is something. If this chapter spoke to you in a quiet way, take a moment to respond. Support this channel by liking the video and subscribing, so these stories can continue reaching people who feel alone in their suffering. You can leave a comment with a simple symbol, not for others to see, but as a personal act of reflection. And if you know someone who may be carrying more than they can say out loud, consider sharing this message with them. The story is not finished. Hope is still available, and meaning can still be found, even here.